This will be a quick little explanation on how to push building in Kenshi to its absolute limit with the help of the great in-game editor, with which you can basically place any object in the game for free. No repercussions whatsoever, no research requirements, nothing. The in-game editor is basically like an alcoholic parent who lets you do whatever the hell you want. Now what it also lets you do is manipulate objects, like change their location, rotate them, and change their size. And this is the part you will abuse to the max. As you might see in this example, I decided to build somewhat of a behemoth like Stope. And the reason for that is I want this behemoth to basically carry the base, or rather carry some rocks, which will also be placed through the editor, which will then in turn be carrying our base, so to speak. And for that, we have to abuse the mechanics of the in-game editor as much as possible, like you see me do here in this video. It can help to know what you want to build, obviously, because there are quite a few objects available in Kenshi, and just knowing which ones you want to use is just an immense help for your building endeavors. Now, I really love this process because it brings a certain creativity, which is typically not seen in base building in Kenshi, like at least not to this degree. Obviously, you can do crazy things with the regular building, but once you realize what is also possible with the editor and with these terrain feature objects, you can paint the world in a sense. Now with the giant robot finished, we move on to placing the rocks which will be carried by him. And again, we will abuse the scaling mechanic absolutely to the max. One important thing here is that you shouldn't use too many smaller rocks, at least not in the ashlands, because as you can see, this biome has the consequence of laying this white layer of ash upon basically anything you build. And if you use too many small rocks, you end up with these ash-covered surfaces in between the gaps, and that just does not look as pretty. So while the behemoth himself may be an ugly bastard, I will still try to looksmax this base as much as possible. One very, very important thing to consider is when placing these terrain features, like we do here, you do have to leave the biome every now and again, because if you don't and the game crashes, you will lose all the progress. Now this is different when you place buildings, but right now we're placing terrain features, and the game is just that finicky sometimes. In theory, this would also be possible by clicking Save Mod when you open the editor in the top right corner, but that method has failed me too much to consider it viable. So yeah, I will just raw dock and leave the zone every now and again. With the rocks almost finished, we will move on to the next part. And in my opinion, most important, and by far the most powerful mechanic, at least as far as building goes in Kenshi. Because you obviously know all these building games like Minecraft, maybe Enshrouded, Valheim, and so on. And what they do is they let you build terrain. Now, when you can build terrain, which you can then walk on, you do get a whole lot of different options for building a base. You can then build vertically. And to be able to build vertically just opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Kenshi lets you do this by placing bridges, for example. Bridges then create terrain for your characters to walk on. However, as before, we will have to move these bridges, obviously, because they can't just stay where they are, where they're being placed. The thing is, the game won't register these bridges where you move them to. The part which you can walk on will stay where you placed the bridge originally until you save and reload the game. So you basically end up with Schrödinger's bridge. They exist in a quantum state, they are there, but they're also not there. Since these bridges are not terrain features, but buildings, we don't have to leave the zone to make them stick. Even if the game crashes, your progress will be saved, provided you have saved the game. Sometimes I do wonder if the great Chris Hunt intended for this mechanic to even be possible in the game. I mean, either way, he's a genius in my opinion, but if he did, that's just crazy to me. But yeah, in this video, I wanted to use the Poontown bridges because usually they're kind of reliable for these kind of projects. However, this time they just would not work as I intended. And I honestly was like 2 to 3 failed bridge placements away from complete insanity. So I did decide to use not these puntown bridges, but these big ramps instead. And that saved me a whole lot of headache. Alright, next up we need to place some more bridges for our characters to walk on. Because these rocks we placed, they're kinda just there for visuals. We cannot really use them as terrain to put buildings on, to walk on, and so on. So yeah, more bridges it is. Fortunately, this time the bridges did not fail me. Whether that might due to me not moving them, rotating them as much, or any other reason, I don't know. But we will just go with the flow there. The good thing is, once you placed a bridge successfully, the game then, like I said, creates basically walkable terrain, or like actual terrain. And this is important because you can then use this terrain basically as a starting point for any other placements you want to do, like buildings, for example, like other bridges, for example. And this will be much, much easier than placing these things at the bottom and pulling them all the way up. The exception to that rule are walls, because somehow they don't work. They just constantly want to snap for some reason. And those have to, unfortunately, be placed all the way down and then pulled all the way up. Even if you already have walls in place at the top, you still can't use the snapping feature. That's just Kenshi for you. Oh, and one more thing. When you moved an object too far in the editor, there is a certain effect that takes place where when you move too close to the object, it will just turn invisible until you saved and reload the game. Sometimes I'm far too lazy to do that, so I decided to stick with it and move the camera far away and just hope everything works out. One general rule you can follow when thinking of bases or whatever you want to build in Kenshi is thinking of set pieces, or rather centerpieces, which are like visual hooks that help you define the base and what you want it to be. In this case, the visual hook is obviously the giant robot or giant skeleton that is carrying the base itself. Oh, and one more thing regarding builds like these, where you put bridges or walkable terrain high above the ground, is when you have your characters on these bridges themselves and save and reload, you can sometimes find them at the ground floor instead. That does not happen if you put your characters in the buildings. The rest of the process is just placing more buildings, placing more decorations, just making the base feel more lively, in a sense. And while doing that, you often do get other inspirations too. Like perhaps there are more terrain features you want to add to the base, which make it look that much better. But whatever you add, don't forget to save and reload frequently, and if you add terrain features, make sure you leave the zone, or save the mod if that works for you. So while I did explain quite a few things, that was as basic as it gets. Because a build like this comes with quite a few preparations you have to make, and most of these are in the FCS, or just planning, like making a blueprint, for example, or drawing a rough sketch, which is what I like to do, just as a reference for future building when you do the base. And since I don't want to bore anyone, I will just cut the rest of the process all the way to the end and give you a montage of the finished base. Like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this, because there's much, much more to come.